A Long Night Chapter 2. As Tom sat and waited with the rest for the scan results, he Googled appendicitis to find more about this illness he had searched before. After his little dive in medical articles and personal experiences on appendicitis, he had the basic knowledge about it and wasn't as clueless as he was before. Nevertheless, accidents happen and doctors are only humans themselves. Surgery was always a risky procedure and complications can occur. Of course, there was the whole alien hedgehog from space that was also to be considered. From what they knew and understood, Sonic had never had a surgery before, and they didn't know how his body would react. Tom sighed deeply. This was so sudden and unexpected. There were so many thoughts and doubts in his mind, and he was stressed to say the least. He looked beside him where the rest of his family was sleeping soundly. Maddie had Sonic on her lap, a blanket around him and his head on her chest while sleeping with his mouth open, and she was equally unresponsive, her head resting on her husband's shoulder while she had Sonic cuddled in her arms. He smiled to himself. At least he had his family to rely on, a happy, loving family. A few silent minutes passed when the clock hit 7. Right at that moment the doctor appeared on the hallway they were sitting and approached the exhausted family. With him another doctor, Benji, Tom recalled. Tom looked up and then shook Maddie to wake her up as well. Sonic needed rest, so he let him be, but Maddie would want to be filled in on her son's health.
Hello, Doctor.
Hello and good morning. So, Sonic's scans just finished, and after some examination, we concluded that he indeed has an inflamed appendix or appendicitis. As I informed you before, surgery is required to remove the inflamed part before it becomes worse and affects other parts of the abdomen. Dr. Ben and I will be conducting the surgery at 8:00 today to get it removed as soon as possible.
Dr. Sean said.
Oh, Benji, how are you today?
Tom offered a handshake, which Benji took gladly.
Good.
He then looked at Maddie, who just shook her head as a greeting since she was still holding Sonic.
Should we go to my office and explain the situation further?
Sean suggested. The couple looked at each other and then agreed to the doctor's suggestion, wanting to learn what was going to happen to Sonic from now on. When they arrived at the office, Sean took his place behind his desk. Benji sat close to him to have contact with the Wachowskis, and the said family sat on 2 chairs across them.
So,
Sean began.
Firstly, we'll administer antibiotics before the appendix is taken out to fight infection. After a 30-minute session, we will give him general anesthesia, then he will be taken to the operation room. Dr. Ben will be on my side the whole time since he has more experience with child surgeries and will help with the procedure. The surgery will take about 1 hour, and then recovery time takes 24 to 36 hours depending on the patient. Since then he will be taken home to you and will be in recovery for 1 to 2 weeks. Take it easy with him. He doesn't need to be in constant bed rest, but he should be careful until the tissue is healed. The scar should be cleaned every morning and night until it is closed completely. Any questions?
He finished his speech.
What about his body? Do you know how to operate on him?
Maddie asked.
Well, from the CT scan, we took a look at Sonic's system, and it seems it has no difference to one of a human child as such. All organs are in the same position as a human. However, if anything is uncommon, will be seen during the operation. As you understand, we don't have the time privilege to take more examinations, but from what we can tell, it will run smoothly.
Benji answered the question, more skilled to the children's field. The couple looked at each other and turned to the doctors.
All right, then.
Tom said.
Right?
The doctor clapped his hands once and stood, the rest of the room following his action.
The nurse is waiting for you outside and will lead you to Sonic's room for the rest of his stay in the hospital, and we will see you again before the surgery.
Thank you, Doctor.
Tom replied.
We will take good care of him, dears,
said Benji. The couple walked outside the room after giving a thankful nod to the doctors responsible for their child's life at the moment. A nurse was indeed waiting for them in the corridor and led them to the hospital room. When they arrived, she said she had changed the sheets and that she was going to write his chart in a second. Maddie placed Sonic in the bed and uncurled him from the blanket. She then placed the sheets over the sleeping hedgehog and their blanket on top. He caressed his cheek, trying to smooth his pained expression, and even though the hedgehog relaxed a bit, the expression was still on his face. She looked back at Tom, who had his hands on his waist and was looking around their new room for the next days. Tom finally made eye contact and saw his wife's tired face. Maddie walked into Tom's awaiting arms and crushed into his warm and awaiting embrace. Tom held her as close as he could and took a deep breath.
He is going to be all right.
He tried to reassure them both.
He is going to be just fine.
Tom said and pulled her closer. Maddie looked up at Tom and sighed, looking back at the child on the hospital bed, looking as tiny and fragile as ever.
Well, I'm just concerned, that's all. He was just fine yesterday, and now.
She let out a breath that she felt she had been holding since she woke up.
Oh, but he's strong and fast and is going to be fine just as fast.
The nurse walked in again and the couple broke their hug and held hands as they began walking towards Sonic's bed.
Little guy's just out, isn't he?
She commented with a small but supportive smile on her face.
Yep, I guess he couldn't handle it. He hadn't been in a situation like this before.
Maddie responded, looking at Sonic's sleeping form, covered from the blankets.
How long has he been sleeping for exactly?
Well, he slept pretty early today, and then he woke up at,
She tried to be as accurate as possible, but she wasn't the first one up, so she looked at Tom.
I guess I heard him at 5 something, and I guessed that he was up at least an hour before that, so he probably got a few hours of sleep in, and then he basically passed out in our arms at about 6, I would say.
Tom tried to remember.
And he hasn't even stilled all this time. Is this okay? I mean, is something not good?
Maddie worried over her beloved child. She placed her hand on Sonic's arm and held it tight, but not too tight to wake him up either.
Well, I was just about to do an overall check of his health now, so we will see.
The nurse started checking Sonic's breathing and heart rate once again and started hooking him up on 2 separate machines that Maddie nor Tom knew the purpose of. She then checked the machines and used her stethoscope to hear his heartbeat once again.
His heart is beating a little slower than normal, but a slow heart can be caused by severe exhaustion. I guess his little buddy could not take it all at once, so he is in deep rest. Unfortunately, we will have to wake him up from his slumber to give him the antibiotics. He can fall asleep after. I just don't think being woken up by a needle would enjoy him much.
She said as she prepared a bag of antibiotics and the things she would need to make the connection to his body. Maddie went from one side of the bed and Tom from the other. Maddie placed her hand on his head and tried to wake him up while Tom accompanied her, but much slower, letting her take lead in this while he held the speedster's arm and shoulder.
Sonic, baby, wake up for a second, okay?
She kindly asked.
Wake up for a second and then you can go back to sleep.
She tried. Sonic moved his head slowly but didn't open his eyes.
Come on, buddy, lock up.
Tom said while petting his form. Waking noises came from the sleeping hedgehog as he slowly moved around and finally opened his eyes. He looked around trying to understand where he was and what had happened. He remembered sleeping in Tom's arms, but now he was laying somewhere.
There you are.
Maddie whispered. Sonic made eye contact with the 2 figures over him that were looking at him intensely.
Maddie.
He said, voice hoarse from sleep and disuse.
Hey, buddy, do you remember where we are?
Sonic looked around and saw Tom on his left.
Tom.
He asked quizzically, still out of it.
I was trying to get sleep.
Sonic looked around slowly, not answering either of their questions. He shakily tried to stand up from his laying position, and both Maddie and Tom helped him sit up. Sonic looked around, not understanding where he was, but he looked at the shape of the bed, the white walls, and the weird stickers with cables on his chest that made him realize He was in the hospital, right? He slowly started recalling his last memories before he fell asleep. He remembers waking up in the middle of the night being alone and scared, and then Maddie and Tom and then some doctor. He remembers the doctor hurting him in his belly, but doctors don't hurt you, do they? A sharp pain in his belly woke him completely off his trance, and then the immense pain he was feeling came to mind.
That's why I was hurting when the doctor touched me.
He made out. His face contracted to a wince and he placed his hands around his belly, hunching over from the pain. He let out.
Well, my belly hurts a lot.
He winced once more, the pain becoming greater as he woke up completely.
Yes, I know Tommy was hurting and we took you to the hospital to figure what it was, and Dr. Shum did some tests. It turns out you have appendicitis.
Tom looked at him as he tried to make him lay back on the now propped-up bed.
Well, what is appendicitis?
He looked up at Tom, confused.
It's when a part of your intestines becomes ill and it has to be removed. It's very, very common and it happens all the time. All he needs is a very quick surgery to take it, and then you will be all good.
He said in simple words so to not scare the already alert child. However, in the mention of surgery, Sonic shrank to himself and backed away from their embrace.
But I don't want surgery.
He pleaded slowly.
We know it might sound scary, but you won't even feel a prick. You are gonna go to sleep, and then when you wake up you won't be hurting anymore.
Maddie tried to reason with him again.
But no.
He looked at both of them pleading. Tears started welling in his eyes. He was confused, and the pain in his abdomen didn't make it easier to understand. Tom pulled him in his arms for a hug, and Sonic hid his head in his chest, curling in himself. Sniffles could be heard coming through Tom's arms, and Maddie placed her hand on the child's arm, trying to comfort him.
It's going to be just fun. You'll see it's not a fun experience, but in today's we will be out of here. The sooner we get the part out of you, the quicker we will go home.
Tom said.
Hey, Sonic, look at me.
Maddie asked, her hand gently moving on his head. Sonic turned his head, still in Tom's arms.
You don't want your tummy to be hurting any longer, right?
After a few seconds of hiccups, Sonic nodded with tears in his eyes.
Yes, I know, but when they will do the small surgery that you won't even feel, the pain will stop and you won't feel anything hurting you anymore.
She said with a gently.
All right, darling.
Sonic hiccuped some more before he nodded quickly and shoved his head in Tom's chest. After some minutes in the embrace, Tom saw the nurse silently waiting with her equipment ready for the cannula. He looked at Maddie and slowly removed Sonic from his arms while still holding his shoulders.
You all right there, big guy?
He asked lovingly. Sonic looked at him with tears in his eyes, sniffling, looking like the cutest child on earth. Tom agreed that look killed him, and nodded.
All right then, let the nurse put something on your wrist.
He asked again, and Sonic nodded, the situation starting to sink in. He didn't want to be in pain any longer, so he could just comply.
All right.
Tom looked at the nurse and she slowly wheeled her tray next to Maddie. Maddie went out of her way and instead stood close to Sonic's legs. Sonic looked at the nurse, which he had realized was in the room till now. She looked kind and friendly, but Sonic didn't know what she was going to do, so he looked at her hesitantly.
Hey there, Sonic. I'm Susie, and you're probably going to see me around until you leave Bithka now. I'm going to connect you with this bag hanging above your head.
Sonic looked up and saw the antibiotics bag that looked like those weird milk bags sold in the supermarket sometimes to him.
Okay, honey.
She asked sweetly, pouring some antiseptic on a cotton pad. Sonic looked at her, scared and confused. He nodded once, looking at the equipment she was holding.
I'm going to wipe that area here,
she said as she scrubbed the cotton on Sonic's right wrist.
And now that it's clean, I'm going to put this little tube in you now. You might feel a prick and it will hurt a little. So can you look at your mug and take a deep breath in for me, and you'll...
Tom held Sonic's shoulders and placed a kiss on his head, knowing that the prick wouldn't please the hedgehog much. Sonic looked at Maddie, scared written all over his face, and Maddie told him it was okay and placed her hand on one of his feet. Sonic's face morphed into one of pain, and he closed his eyes as his wrist started hurting. Tears started flowing down his face, and he let out a long wince as Maddie and Tom tried to calm him down. He tried to move away from the nurse hold on his wrist and pull his arm towards him, but both the nurse and Tom's hold held him in place. He started crying as the pain didn't go away, and the nurse started talking to calm him down.
I'm almost done here, Sonic. It's okay.
Sonic felt her hands move above his wrist, placing stuff on it, but he didn't look.
And there it is, almost ready.
She started placing some tape so the cannula wouldn't move.
And done.
She said and started cleaning the stuff on the bed and her tray.
You were very brave, Sonic.
Sonic looked at her.
Now I'm gonna come again in half an hour to see how you are doing, okay?
She patted his arm, and after offering a smile to Tom and Maddie, she left the room. Sonic was still crying, but after some minutes his cries started to slow down to hiccups. He looked at his wrist and saw a weird thing on it, and then a tube going all the way up to the weird bag over him. He tried to look at the weird stuff in his wrist again, but when his other hand tried to touch it, Maddie's hand stopped him.
No, we don't mess with those, all right?
She said as she once again went to his side. She sat on the bed beside him, careful not to squeeze him, and placed her arm around his shoulders. Sonic curled on her once again and rested his sleepy head on her chest.
Well, don't just sleep somewhere and you're going to wake up when it's time, alright?
Tom said, sitting on the bed in front of them. Sonic nestled further into Maddie and she hugged him tighter, resting her head on his.
No, it's okay. I'm not sleepy.
He said. Tom could see his tired expression and his lethargic movements. He knew he was minutes away from falling asleep.
I see you, but why don't you try closing your eyes for a few seconds to test it out, huh?
He said sneakily. Maddie smiled and started doing circles on Sonic's back to relax him and get him to sleep faster.
No, I'm not sleeping until the nurse comes back. I want to see how she goes. Surgery. She's okay, I guess. Wait.
In seconds he was from being almost asleep to alert.
Well, will you be here? You won't leave me, will you?
He desperately looked at both of them.
No, Sonic, we are not leaving your side, buddy. We will be here the whole time. Now try to go back to sleep.
Maddie said as she guided his head back on her chest. Sonic took one last look at Tom and then closed his eyes. A few seconds passed and he was sleeping again in his mom's arms, safely tucked away. Maddie looked up at Tom and smiled.
Why don't you get some sleep, honey? I will be watching him till the doctors comes.
Maddie said, and Tom sat down on a chair close to the bed.
Yep, I guess I should get some shut, I tell.
Tom took a look at Maddie and Sonic and rested his head on the wall. He sighed and closed his eyes, going to sleep a few moments after. Tom woke up to the nurse coming back inside. He realized he had probably been sleeping for 20 minutes or so. He stood up as the nurse greeted them silently.
Hello, I'm back again.
She whispered, taking into account the sleeping hedgehog.
Hello.
Maddie and Tom whispered in unison. Maddie was awake, still holding Sonic in her arms. She tried to stand up to let the nurse do her job. However, the nurse stopped her.
No, it's okay. You can stay there. I'm just going to remove the bag and close the tubey until the doctor comes.
She said and moved towards Sonic's hand.
It's almost 8 o'clock, so the doctor will be here soon. I'm going to bring in the anesthesia, and an anesthesiologist will come in along with the doctors. Do you want to wake him up to say duty before he is wheeled in?
She kindly asked the couple. Maddie looked at Tom, who had gone on the other side of the bed once again. Tom looked back at her.
What do you say?
Maddie asked him.
Even if it would be a hustle, I think he would want to say goodbye and see we are still here.
he said.
Yep, I think so too.
She said as she looked down at Sonic. She placed him on the bed fully and sat properly on the bed looking at him.
Sonic.
She whispered and she stroked his arms, trying to wake him up slowly.
Wake up, sleepyhead.
Sonic started staring and he slowly opened his eyes.
That's it, buddy.
Sonic let out a big yawn and went to close his eyes again, but Tom stopped him, placing his hand on his shoulder.
Come on, buddy. The doctor is coming in a few.
He insisted. Sonic sat up on the bed with a wince and looked around. He spotted the nurse on the side of the room waiting patiently.
I think she's already here.
He told him, looking at the nurse the whole time. The nurse smiled at him and came closer. Tom looked behind him to see the doctor, only to find Susie standing close to the bed. He and Maddie smiled.
I'm not your doctor, honey. I'm your nurse, Susie, remember?
I have more doctors.
He asked, shocked, and looked at Tom. Laughter echoed through the room.
I'm glad to see you all in a good mood.
A male voice said, and everyone looked at the door, seeing Dr. Sean and Dr. Benji coming inside.
This is your doctor, sweetie.
Maddie said as she stood up and held his hand.
Hello there. I see someone is finally awake, huh?
Sean kindly said.
I'm Dr. Sean, and this is Dr. Ben. We will help you get better and get rid of the appendicitis.
He introduced himself and his colleague. Sonic surely let out. He faintly remembered the first doctor, but he didn't recognize the second one.
Hello there, Sonic. Are you ready, big man?
Benji approached in a more friendly way to make the kid trust them.
I guess.
Sonic replied, looking at Benji. Then he looked up at Tom and Maddie, who just looked at him and took hold of both his arms.
Okay then, a lady is going to come now. She is very funny and kind, and she is going to put a funny mask on you. The mask has some air coming inside and you might feel like you want to sleep. That's fine with us. Sleep all you want, and when you wake up you're going to be here again, but after the work we will have done you won't feel any pain in your belly.
Benji continued. A female voice was heard this time, but a machine was the only thing everyone saw until she fully walked in the room, pushing the machine in front of her.
Oh, here she is. Hello, Christine.
Benji said.
Hello, guys. I'm Dr. Tristan, and I will be your anesthesiologist for the night. So who's this hedgehog I have been given to?
She said as she wheeled the machine next to the bed.
I think that's me.
Sonic said with a small smile on his face.
Oh, is that right now? Hello there, what's your name?
She asked as she started preparing the machine.
Oh, Sonic.
He said, focusing on her.
That's a nice name. Now I will be moving this very funny guess on you in a second, and do you know what it's called?
She continued setting on the machine.
George.
That's a great guess, but its name is Laughing Mask.
She said, a smile on her face.
That's a strange name.
He said, intrigued by the funny nurse.
Yeah, I know, right?
She looked at Tom and Maddie while holding the mask at her hand.
I think it's time to say bye now before I can show him how the Laughing Mask works.
She gave the couple a kind look, ushering them to hug him one last time before he is wheeled away. Maddie quickly hugged the hedgehog with tears in her eyes, trying to hold herself while hugging him so as not to let him see. She kissed his cheek and gave him a last squeeze before realizing her hands. Tom saw that she was struggling to keep it together, so he quickly hugged Sonic to leave time for Maddie to wipe her face, although she was still sniffling.
I will see you later, big man. Have a nice sleep, alright?
His voice broke at the last sentence, but he managed to hold it in at least until Sonic was not in the room.
I'm not gonna sleep, I'm just going to put on the Laughing Mask, Dad.
Sonic said, not having...
Alright, I'm sorry I forgot you weren't sleepy.
he said as he laughed, tearing a little. He pulled away and watched as the nurse laid the bed down fully.
Okay, now let's put on the laughing mask, sir. Tell me when you feel like laughing, okay?
She asked, a smile still on her face while checking the machine once more. She placed the mask over Sonic's nose and mouth, but the hedgehog caught trying to get used to the steam forcing its way in his airway.
It's okay, that's the fun part of the mask. It has a gas that is called laughing gas that makes you laugh when you breathe it, so take a deep breath in for me.
She told him, still holding the mask over his face. Maddie and Tom had found each other and were holding to one another while holding on to Sonic's hand. Sonic tried to understand how the mask worked, and the coating made him tear-eyed.
Is it working?
He asked, hopeful, to the nurse.
You are gonna see the effects in a second. Try to breathe deeply, okay? Now can you count backwards from 10 for me? I want to know if you know numbers as good as I was told.
She asked him. She seemed like she had done this 1,000 times before and knew how to talk to children.
Yep, I'm good with numbers.
He was starting to get drowsy.
Okay then, let me hear. Count backwards from 10.
She checked the machine one more time before returning her gaze to the child on the bed.
Oh, 10, 9, 7, 6, 5, 4.
At the end of 4, he was asleep. Maddie and Tom watched from a distance, holding his hand that went slack in theirs. Maddie had tears running down her face and was holding on to Tom tightly while still looking at Sonic. Tom tried to support Maddie in his hands, but he was 1 point from breaking down himself. They knew it wasn't a big surgery, and he would be back in an hour, like if he was going to the supermarket with one of them. But the view of their child in a bed, looking so small, with machines all around him, 4 doctors circling him and him being put to sleep, not in their arms but from some gas, was difficult and challenging for any parent.
And he is out?
Tristan said as she looked at the machines attached to him.
Heart rate looking fine. Pressure normal. He is ready.
She removed the mask from his face and closed the machine. Susie came forward and took the stickers off of him and then closed the fast beeping machines.
Okay.
Sean looked at the couple.
He is going to be just fine. He is in good hands. You will see him again in about an hour.
He patted Tom's shoulders and helped slide the bed outside the room. The moment the bed left the room along with the doctors, Maddie and Tom started crying, holding each other in the middle of the empty room. It was too much. It was all too much for them, they silently agreed. After one soul-crushing hour of no updates, Dr. Sean finally appeared in the room. He was dressed in his hospital uniform, cap and all, and he looked less put together than before. The couple, who was previously seated on the chairs, silently drinking coffee, both in their thoughts, stood up at once. The doctor approached them with no stress.
Everything went according to program. They had a normal appendectomy. The appendix was removed successfully and he is in good health at the moment. Dr. Benai is looking over him right now, checking to see if anything changes, but they will bring him here in a few minutes. His oxygen dropped slightly during the operation, so you will see him in a breathing mask that will probably be removed soon. Breathing went well, and according to what we are seeing, he will be discharged in about 2 days.
He finished. The pair let out huge breaths of relief.
Thank goodness.
Tom said as he placed his hands on his waist, finally feeling himself relax. Maddie had put her hands on her head and was breathing deeply, relaxing as well.
Now I'll have to warn you that he is still under the influence of the anesthesia, so he is not well aware of what is happening around him. He is drowsy, but the effects will pass as soon as his metabolism gets rid of the drug in his system. We have put him on some morphine to deal with the pain of the incision, but it can be increased if he still feels pain.
Sean continued.
Thank you so much, Doctor. We are truly thankful.
Tom said as he shook hands with him. Maddie came forward and wrapped her hands around him, giving him a quick.
Thank you, Sean. Truly, Thank you.
She let go of him and wiped some tears of relief off her face. Tom wrapped one hand around her shoulder and kissed her head.
It is our Rob, Gus. You don't have to thank us. Well, I'll go check on him one last time, and then the nurses will be bringing him in.
He told them and then proceeded to leave the room. Tom hugged Maddie fully and let his head fall in their warm embrace. Maddie let out a sniffle or two and Tom hugged her tighter.
It's all right now. See, it's just fun. No need for tears, dear.
Yes, I know. I'm just so relieved.
She breathed in deeply and exhaled loudly, relaxing herself before Sonic came.
Yes, I know. No need to.
He said and closed his eyes, pushing away some tears. The sound of something being wheeled in the corridor made them break their embrace, wipe their faces, and look at the door expectantly, and indeed at 2 seconds after, the door was pushed open and Sonic's bed was carefully being pushed inside the room. There was Benji pushing the bed and 2 nurses guiding it and holding some machines and bags as well.
Hello, Gus.
Susie said as she entered the room.
There we are.
Said Benji as he placed the bed in the right position. He walked to the parents while the nurses were rehooking machines on the blue blur on the bed and checking everything once again.
Well, I believe Sean came and informed you about the success of the operation. He was just fine during the procedure apart for the need for some more oxygen, which is common in surgeries. He is still drugged, but he did open his eyes a few minutes ago. You can see him now, but try not to touch any of the equipment on him or the bandaged area itself. It will definitely feel a bit sore when he is fully aware of what is happening, but the nurses can fix that.
He said.
Thank you so much, Doctor.
Tom said and Maddie copied his actions, now much calmer than before.
It's really nothing. We did our job and the surgery is definitely one of the easy ones. I will come check him in about 2 hours and see you again then.
He told them and walked out of the room. They now had a chance to look at their child in the bed. There were still nurses all around him, but they managed to see his face sticking out of the many blankets. He had his eyes closed. The 2 nurses left and Susie stayed, writing the chart on the end of the bed.
You can come closer now. He is definitely not going to bite you.
She said with a warm smile, trying to lighten the mood. The couple moved forward in unison and made their way to the side of Sonic's bed. Now, with the lack of nurses hiding his small frame, they could see him fully. His face was propped up with some pillows. An oxygen mask was wrapped around his face and you could only see his face and right hand that had been removed from the blankets because of the IV. He looked small, fragile, a kid, but he looked peaceful. His facial features were finally relaxed. He wasn't feeling any pain. Maddie didn't know if she should touch him, in fear that she would bump to the cables connected to the machines. Instead, she put her head close to his and touched his shoulder.
It's okay, you can touch his right hand that's underneath the blankets.
Maddie lifted up the blanket, taking a sneak peek at the geese wrapped it around his belly, and lifted out his left hand. She tucked him back in the blankets and held his hands strongly.
I have to tell you, he's a huge sleepyhead, isn't he?
The nurse said.
He did us the favor to open his eyes for some seconds and then he was back in dreamland.
She laughed sweetly.
Yep, he is a huge sleepyhead indeed.
Maddie said, laughing with glassy eyes. The moment she spoke, Sonic started to stir.
Up here he is. Come on, buddy. Wake up to say hello.
Susie said as she eyed the machines above him. Sonic moved his head a bit and then slowly opened his eyes. His eyes were blinded by the lights and he felt strange. He didn't feel any pain. He felt something on his face bugging him as he tried to reach it and stop him.
No, honey, this is helping you for a little while. We can take it off after.
Susie said gently. Sonic tried to forget the mask for a while and instead looked around to see who spoke. He saw the kind nurse on his left looking at him and then behind him. He then looked to the right and saw his parents.
Hey, baby.
Maddie said, Her voice sounded strange to him. Tom was silently observing him. He tried to say, but he felt really weird, like he didn't have control over his body.
Mom?
He asked and looked around the room. Where was he again?
Yes, baby, I'm here.
She said as she placed a kiss on his cheek.
Here, buddy.
Sonic recognized Tom's voice. He turned his head towards him.
You're right here.
He then placed his hands on his.
I feel funny.
He said, looking around the room once more.
Yep, remember the laughing mask that kind Nurse Kristen showed you?
Maddie asked. Sonic nodded with difficulty, the mask limiting his movements.
It actually worked.
He asked, gaining more consciousness by the minute.
Yes, I think it did.
Tom said, smiling.
Okay, buddy, let's take that off you.
The nurse said and proceeded to lift Sonic's head and remove the mask around him.
Tell me how you feel. Do you feel any pain anywhere?
Sonic focused on how he was feeling. He felt really weird, but his belly wasn't hurting anymore. He kinda felt like he wanted to sleep, though.
I feel sleepy.
He said, drowsily looking up at her.
Well, you want to sleep some more?
She looked up at Maddie and Tom with a knowing expression on her face.
He's really a sleepyhead, Maddie. You weren't lying.
She continued laughing a bit. Maddie laughed as well and looked down at the confused and drowsy hedgehog.
What? I'm definitely not a sleepyhead.
He tried to defend himself.
Tom is, though.
The people in the room laughed, and Tom tried to engage in the conversation.
I can't believe that you have backstabbed me so easily, Sonic.
He said with a smile on his face.
I feel betrayed.
He faked a hurt expression and Sonic laughed.
But he really is.
He turned to Maddie for support. She let out a laugh and started stroking his head.
Okay, now, Trickster, do you want to sleep for a little? Get your batteries charged.
Susie asked the hedgehog. Sonic nodded and closed his eyes briefly.
All right, then I'm gonna leave you to it, but if you feel like anything is hurting you, are gonna tell your parents so I can come check it. Do we have a deal, mister?
He nodded again and looked at her with sleepy eyes.
All right, then.
After she gave one last look at the couple and the hedgehog, she walked out. Sonic looked back at Maddie and Tom.
I feel sleepy.
Yes, we know. Or the nurse. Get some sleep and we're gonna talk again later. I'm going with Sonic.
Tom said and gave him a kiss on the head. Maddie continued her hand movements on the child's cheek and Tom tucked the blanket under his chin, the same movement he had done 10 hours ago. The couple watched the hedgehog as he fell asleep, his body trying to deal with the drug on his system and his fast metabolism getting to work on healing his tired body.
Yep, I'm gonna have to agree on that.